are lots of folks jumping on. I want to make sure. Okay, I do see Faith. And is Matt on? I don't know if I see Matt yet. Okay, but I think we have enough group to get going. So thank you so much for introducing everybody in the chat. So make sure, guys, if you're scroll the chat so you know who are all of the amazing people who join us every single month to continue this conversation around transportation in the North. So welcome, good morning. It is December, and how many days till Christmas? Let's see. Okay, it's actually next Friday. So I know I have lots of wrapping to do, so it's good just to kind of keep that on the radar for me. And also make sure all of my online shopping came in, my other thing to do. So that's what I'll be doing this weekend. So I hope everyone is having a good December so far. It looks like we're gonna have some great weather this weekend, so definitely get out and enjoy this beautiful Colorado winter. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started with a brief overview of the NATA slides.
We thought this would be helpful to Representative Gray and Senator Winter, and also to Deborah Johnson, who's joining us later. She's here now, but will be joining us later. Can we go back to the beginning, please, Carson?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, my computer is being a little, there we go.
All right, so we wanted to give you an overview, and I'm happy to give the narrative on this. NATA was created quite a number of years ago, about 12 years ago, with common goals within this area that you're seeing in this map. So the spine of I-25, and then on either sides of I-25, up and including Longmont, over and including Commerce City and Brighton, and Westminster and Broomfield on the western edge, and all the communities along that area. We wanted to show you the people who belong to NATA. We have 13 community representatives, and we have the Adams County Regional Economic Partnership is a member, and Smart Commute Metro North. And you can see that these on this chart are the people who are representing their communities at our NATA. We generally have between 45 and 65 people at every one of our NATA meetings, and we also include any of the members of Smart Commute, as well as our congressional reps who often attend our meetings. Okay. We really positioned NATA around shared values that include transportation improvements in the North area for future economic development, and also for economic vitality, as well as improving mobility and, of course, reducing traffic congestion. And we try to make sure that we are able to give resources and information to any decision makers who are looking to get input from us. And we've also called out fast track as being a really important part of improving transportation in the Denver metro region, and advocating for fast tracks improvements. Next slide. We put together something called the NATA Leave Behind, and it's a 4-page document that shows who we are. So here are our agencies that are part of NATA, and we say we're really built on consensus. Next slide. Next slide. We talked about our shared vision, and we've put some statistics in there. You'll see there's 720,000 people really within our NATA population. And that doesn't include all of Adams County, but includes the part of Adams County that is within the NATA boundaries. And CDOT tells us 260,000 cars a day coming through the I-25 corridor from Highway 7 down. Okay. Next slide. We've got a pictorial here of the communities along the NATA boundaries, and a little blurb about each of those communities and what's important to them, and a little thumbprint of who they are. Next slide. This is something that we update quite frequently. It's our primary projects list. We have a fairly sophisticated process in how we determine what is a priority and what isn't a priority. We have 3 levels of priority. And this level of priority is our projects that are shovel ready or have enough preliminary analysis done to make them shovel ready. And there's so many here that we have linked to our website, and then this QR code at the bottom, if you hit that, it will take you to the projects, tell you about the projects, where the location of that projects are, what the estimated cost of that project is. And then 2 other levels beyond that, which are projects that we're looking at and have it on the radar and hoping to move those forward, and other projects that aren't necessarily the full NATA list of improvements but are endorsed by NATA. And anytime any of the communities want to have a letter of support, we'll do that. And as Deborah Baskett just pointed out, you know, these projects that are on the priority list have some funding or the possibility to have some funding. And we look at this list about I'd say once every other year, sometimes once every year, depending on the movement on the list. Slide, please. We're getting there. Okay, so one of the things we did early on in NATA is to try to figure out if we can position ourselves in places of influence in order to talk about this collaborative effort we have up in the north. And so we put together a matrix of influence, and it's not a static matrix. It's one that changes almost every year or during the year. And we wanted to just show, we've put in here Faith and Matt because they're important to us in the North End. We've talked about who's on CDOT, who has positions at DRCOG, who represents us at RTD. And if you look at some of these, on the RTD, you see Julie Mullica, who's our chair, is the Accountability Committee chair of the Governance Committee. On RTC, Vince Buick, who is on RTD, represents RTD at RTC. And Citizens Advisory Committee has former Mayor Nancy McNally on there, and our own Catherine Sanders on there represented us. And then if you look Metro Mayor's Caucus, CML and MAC, we have Herb Atchison and Jessica Singren and Commissioner Scudericio on there as well. We've probably left out some important people on this matrix, and we always ask that anybody who has any updates to this matrix to let us know. We think it's important that we try to be involved in any agency or any committee or any stakeholder group that talks about transportation. Thank you. Is there anything else, Carson? I think, oh yes, here we go. Carson, are you going to take this one?
Sure, I can. Just to quickly highlight our success as Smart Commute Metro North and the support of NATA with our 144th Flex Ride grant program we've had for the last year. Here's just some really important numbers we put together for our end of year newsletter. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary and 10,000 rides on the Flex Ride. None of this would be possible without our 144th Flex Ride program manager hand-holding out there every day, riding the shuttle. As you can see, she rides over 78 hours over the last year with people trying to make significant tweaks to the service. And that flexibility has been really important to see the success of a program that addresses workforce transit and essential workers in 2020.
This one is just an overview of where our RTD district representatives areas are, and you can see we have 4 that represent us in our area, and these are the districts I, K, J, and L. And then of course we have our transportation representatives who look out for our area, and that's Senator Faith Winter and Representative Matt Ray. And Julie, now I'll turn it over to you to introduce them and have an update from them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. That was a great overview, Karen. I appreciate it, and Carson. Thank you for putting those slides together, because I think it's always good that we highlight our successes and then just highlight who we are as a group, and how many different people we bring to the table and bring to the conversation, especially for the North area. So it's really important that NATA continues to be a voice in transportation interest moving forward for the North area. And we are very excited this morning to have Senator Faith Winter and Representative Matt Gray join us and give us a little bit of a transportation update. What are some things that we could be seeing for this next upcoming legislative session? So please, Faith, Matt, whoever wants to kick it off first, go ahead. Thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here with you all. We are working on a transportation bill, and we wanted to give you an update, also get some feedback, answer questions, and officially ask for formal feedback. We are very optimistic that this is going to be the year to get transportation funding done, because we're making it a priority. It's the top priority for myself. It's the top priority for Matt. It's also the top priority for our governor right now. And we all know that when the governor decides that he wants to get something done, he works very hard to do that. And so what we can do is we're going to talk about both the inputs, and then we're also going to talk about the outputs. And so where do we get the funding for transportation? What does that look like? Where do we build this money coming from? And then the outputs, and how are we spending this money? And so what I want to do is hand it over to Representative Gray. He's on audio, he's not on video, but he usually discusses the inputs, and then I'll talk about the outputs, and then we'll open it up to questions from you all.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I apologize. I am just on audio this morning. This is the part of the morning where I traffic children around and get them dropped off in the various places they need to be. On the input side, what we're trying to do and what we need to do is finally address the gas tax problem we have in our state, which is that the gas tax has been a primary state level funder of transportation infrastructure in our state, and it's been stagnant since 1992 when Tabor was called an attack before have not it's a certain haven't adjusted it for inflation since then. So you know what 30 years of 30 years of inflation hit any revenue source, then you're going to wind up in trouble. And then also, we're actively trying to use less and less gasoline for climate reasons. So we're both trying to use less gas, and also the value that we get for the charge we have on gas is going down. So we want to do two things. We want to increase, and again, it'll be a fee and not a tax, like increase the fee on gasoline to cover the short and medium term. Like the short, it's where the revenue is right now. It's what people are accustomed to paying. And we need to sort of correct the errors of the past by increasing that in a few cents a gallon in a way that people aren't really going to notice that much, but will make a big difference in the aggregate. But it's also not a long-term solution. So long-term, what do we want to do? We want to what Senator Winter and I call, introduce modernization fees, which is to build a funding structure for transportation as it's going to exist in the future. A stable of revenue sources that are going to grow as gas goes down. So what does that look like? Well, it looks like charges on electric vehicles, charges on autonomous vehicles, charges for UPS and FedEx and Amazon and the folks who are delivering more packages right now than they ever have before, which again may decline with the pandemic, but with the pandemic ending hopefully soon, but we don't know for sure. But also getting deeper into other things, right? Like getting into Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and Uber Eats and, you know, all the different services where folks are hiring other people to use the roads and other people are using the roads for them, but they're not paying for the roads right now. And to get into those sources to say, like, look, if you're, you know, if you're somebody like me who, you know, orders probably 5 DoorDash meals a week, that you're paying for the roads because you also use the roads. And again, it's not just roads, and I'll let Faith get into that in just a second when it comes to outputs versus inputs. But we want everybody who is using our transportation system to use it. We also want to express our values on the input side. So for example, like right now there are no autonomous vehicles on our roads, but we also want to make sure that once there are, we want to make, you know, we are totally fine with autonomous vehicles. We want to make empty ones really expensive. Like we want to charge you more to have an empty autonomous vehicle because for a couple of reasons. One is it's just, you know, we want people to be efficient with how they use the roads. And second of all, you know, right now you have no constituents calling you saying, I was in a traffic jam with 3 empty cars, but like it will happen. And we'll, you know, once that ever happens, it will be like when people are like, look, the car that stopped me from getting through that last red light, you know, had 0 people in it. We're trying to prevent that as much as possible ahead of time and to prioritize moving people around versus just moving cars around. And Faith will talk about that more. So like, we're talking about, again, sort of a package of fees. We're not talking about going to the ballot. You know, we have talked recently with all the folks who have paid for previous ballot issues, and there is no appetite whatsoever for going to the ballot for a tax increase or something like that again. You know, like I was a Prop 110 supporter for sure, but there's no appetite for that among the people who fund those things. So then where we're left is fees, and if people have more detailed questions about fees versus taxes, I can answer those too. I won't take up any more of people's time. But what we're looking at is something inside the building, which is, you know, parlance that we use to say, you know, passing a bill that can accomplish this without having to go to a vote of the people and just delivering results for the people without forcing them to make the decision, just delivering results for them. But what it looks like is, and this is the last thing I'll say, is that all of these groups, none of these groups have shown resistance to paying in a little bit more to have a better system. Whether it's the truckers, whether it's Lyft, Uber, the contractors, you know, the chambers, everybody is willing to say, yep, our members are willing to pay in a little bit more as long as we're in this together. And so like that's our general plan on the input side is we're all in this together. Everybody's going to pay in a little bit more. Nobody's going to pay in an unfair amount. And so far the reaction has been very strong and very positive. And with that, I will I will send it to Faith to talk about if we actually do get this funding, how we want to spend it.
Great, thank you so much. So that's on the input side. And then on the output side, it's going to look different than transportation bills have looked in the past, because we are trying to look towards the future. We're also looking at how the behaviors we want to promote and encourage. And also, since the last time we talked about transportation funding, the legislature passed 1261, which is our climate goals legislation that has goals around carbon reduction. And one of the biggest sectors that we need carbon reduction in is transportation. Right now, transportation sector is the second largest emitter of carbon in the state. And so we need to be meeting our 1261 carbon reduction goals. There will be hearing at the AQCC next summer in 2021 around the transportation goals, but we want to structure this package to make sure we are supporting that rulemaking and support meeting those goals. So first off, that means a lot more money for multimodal. And in NATA's area, that means RTD. However, it's really important when we talk about multimodal that we emphasize this isn't just money for RTD. We're working with the Colorado Association of Transit Agencies, CASTA. We actually have 63 transit agencies across the state, from the Eastern Plains to the Western Slope, all along the I-70 corridor. And all of these organizations, one, because of COVID, they've been decimated, just like restaurants have because of capacity reductions. So they're in need right now. And pre-COVID, nearly every single one of them was at capacity and could expand given the resources and serve more people. So there's going to be more money on multimodal. And then we're going to need to spend money on the infrastructure of meeting climate goals. So in 1261, there's a really big goal for how many electric vehicles that we need to put on the road. And we don't have the infrastructure, the charging stations to accommodate that yet. So we are meeting with utilities, we're meeting with the governor's energy office on what does that look like, spending some of this money to have the infrastructure for electric vehicles. We also, both on the input and output side, want to add an equity lens, because we do know that the gas tax, gas fee can be regressive. And so when we're talking about electrification, part of that is also making sure that low-income people have access to electric vehicles as well as increase multimodal. And then, of course, we're not saying no new lane miles, but where are we putting those new lane miles to relieve congestions and really relieve pressure points? And to make sure that we are reducing congestion, improving people's lives, and it also reduces pollution when we do that. And so we're looking at goals around that on the output side. Now, that doesn't mean we're not giving money to local governments. It is very, very important, both for Matt and I, for the funding formula to include local governments the way it does now. And so we're not saying that, but when we talk about changing the formula, it's really changing the formula on how we're spending the money. In saying, you know, here, local governments, here's some of your money, and you have to spend some of it on this climate piece and this climate mitigation piece. And so we're working through all of that. And then, as everyone knows, 117 passed on the ballot, which said no new fees over a certain amount without going back to the voters. However, we have 2 existing enterprises within transportation, and legally we can increase fees and raise money through those existing enterprises without having to go back to the voters. And so that's HUTF and HPTE. And so figuring out how we're spending this money through one, if not both of those enterprises is what we'll be doing. And so that's overall what we're looking at. And then some other overlying factors I know are going to be really important to NATA is Front Range Rail is going to be part of the conversation. The governor very much likes Front Range Rail and wants to see it happen. This bill is not going to be enough to fund Front Range Rail, but what's the next big step that we can take on Front Range Rail? And how can we structure it, both the governance of Front Range Rail to make sure it's representing all regions along the Front Range, and making sure that they are working with RTD. And I know Deborah Brown's joining later, and we've had some great conversations with her to make sure that Front Range Rail is connecting with RTD. The last thing we want to do is spend money on a project that's going to duplicate what's already happened in Fast Tracks. Building another line through downtown Denver doesn't make any sense. Now, making sure Front Range Rail can connect at the Lone Tree stop and then connect at what's going to be the most northern stop, hopefully at Highway 7, right? And then can Front Range Rail also help the US 36 corridor get up and running as well? And so those are all conversations that are happening. And then finally making sure that Front Range Rail is talking to the I-70 corridor, because what's the next big step we can take to solve I-70, knowing that we can't fund it all? So that's where we're at in terms of inputs, outputs, and some other tied in issues. And with that, we'd love to open it up for questions, concerns, ideas. And then we are asking organizations to officially give us, what are your bottom lines? What do you need in the bill? And ask, or what do you really not want in the bill? And then what are your aspirations? What would you like to see? And so, because we want to move fairly quickly on this, and not just have tons of conversations and wait around till April and say it's too hard like we have for so many years. And so we're asking for feedback in a timely manner. So.
Yeah, and that's one other thing I forgot to say on the input side is, and I apologize, the governor has a $220 million request for general fund money for infrastructure spending, including transportation. But Faith and I both want to include that in this conversation, and not just give general fund money away for transportation without getting a long-term plan, but also the way it's described is described as like needing shovel-ready projects. And that's sort of a term that we all learned in 2009 and 2010. But we both want to make sure that we spend that money right, but also make sure that it's part of this, that is a part of this conversation. And we're talking to our leadership about that. Like, we don't know for sure, and we're talking to the governor's office soon also. But if we are going to, general fund resources are very scarce right now. So if we are going to spend them on this, we want to make sure that it's part of the kind of sustainable long-term project, as far as funding goes, that we're talking about right now. But what that means is exactly what Senator Winter was talking about a second ago, which is we need to, what we're hearing from our leadership is we need to act sooner rather than later, because the administration wants if we want to couple the stimulus stuff with our overall program, that they want to just move it all sooner rather than later, because they're going to want the general fund stimulus stuff to move. So it just means, there's, as hard as it is when you're like the Thursday before the holidays, like I get that, or in the midst of the holidays, depending on which faith you practice. But either way, like, I know it's a tough time to spring into action, but also, like, we're probably going to have to address this sooner rather than later, because we want to make sure that, like, that general fund money is like one of our best bargaining chips to build something sustainable and that meets the values of people like NATA. But we need to move quickly if we're going to do it, if we're going to keep that. So, like, we can get a better deal if we can move quickly, but it just means we need our partners to move quickly also. And also, I apologize, because again, it's obviously the holiday season, but we kind of need folks to keep acting.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, guys, for that update. So I have a couple people who have some questions. First, Paul was asking in the chat, do you guys have a draft bill that can be reviewed and sent to the group?
We do not, because this bill is likely to be 70 pages long, right? And so our plan right now is to get feedback from everyone, put together a white paper, and circulate that white paper for reactions. But even before that white paper, we'd like to get some initial feedback. Obviously, it's an ongoing conversation, and it's not that you can just give initial input right now and then we're not going to talk to you, but we want that initial feedback to put that white paper together.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So I have a question from Malcolm. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Yes, Representative Gray mentioned imposing fees on EVs, and while I fully support updating the gas tax, I just wanted to confirm, there's already a $50 fee on plug-in electric vehicles. If you translate that on a mileage basis, it assumes that an EV drives over 20,000 miles a year. So just wanted to confirm that and get a better idea of what fees you would be charging on EVs.
Yeah, and this is not. I assure you, we do know that. We probably will be increasing it anyway, and part of it is just that we're going to try to moderate the level of increase based on the fact that we're going to be increasing fees on everybody. But like, that is the deal. Like, the deal is everybody pays in a little bit more. I'm also the one who ran the last year the tax credit extension for EVs, and Will Tour still works at the governor's office and is gonna and has influence there, and we're we're going to do what it takes to get as many EVs on the road as possible. But it's also true that our deal with everyone has been, you know, if everybody who uses the roads, and, you know, again, this is the other thing I guess neither of us said, you know, we refer to these things as road usage charges, not vehicle miles traveled, because that makes certain people really nervous. But like our deal is, right now we've relied on diminishing gasoline for everyone. It's not working, and so everybody who's actually using the roads, we're going to go ask a little bit more for, and that includes electric vehicles that don't use gas, and everybody else that I said before. But the answer is yes. We are keenly aware of what our inputs and outputs are now. It's just that our inputs and outputs are not adequate, and so we're going to ask everybody for a little bit more input. You know, which again involves charges, but also, as Senator Winter described, we're gonna have a very climate friendly lens on how we do the outputs. And so when it comes to EV infrastructure and stuff like that, like, it's not a charge that's not going to come with a benefit. It's a charge to EV users, is a charge that's going to come with a benefit.
That sounds good. Thank you very much.
You know what I mean? Like we're gonna give you infrastructure in exchange for asking for more as EV users, but we're going to ask for more because we're going to ask for more from everybody.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Steve O'Dorisio.
Thank you, Senator Winter and Representative Gray. I put in the chat, I think you guys are doing more outreach and stakeholding than I've seen in any bill in any memory that I've got. And I want to compliment you. This is like the third time I've heard you come in front of a group, and I think you're doing a great job. I do want to kind of highlight the fact that you guys are consistently bringing up that we need to have get you some input, because it sounds like I like how you guys put it. There's inputs and there's outputs. The inputs is where do we get different streams of revenue, and the outputs is where we spend it, but also how. And so I'm always, I think this group is going to be very interested in making sure that we understand if there are, how we can participate. I mean, I'm sure that Karen Stewart would love to write the first draft of that white paper if you needed help with that. But if there are some, how can we have some influence on both the inputs, the outputs, not just the projects, but the how of the projects, the filters that you kind of mentioned on if there's going to be a certain percentage that's going to be allocated for X versus Y, on how we spend any new revenues. And then also, is it safe to assume that anything that when you guys put in new filters or change some of the breakdown of local government, HUTF, things like that, that you're talking about putting filters on the new stuff, or are you looking at changing the old as well? So there's kind of like, how can we have influence on that? Thank you for clarifying. And then also, can you clarify that the old money is not going to change much, but it's the new stuff that you're referring to?
Yeah, so
I'll let Faith answer that question. Well, Faith should answer that question. Before we start, we should all note that Steve O'Dorisio is a notorious scoundrel, and generally a bad person who I'm not sure we should listen to him, but he somehow came up with a good question. But I'll let Senator Winter address that one.
you won't see Matt and I disagree on much, but on the character of Steve O'Dorisio, I will have to say that I disagree. I think he is a very good character.
I know him better than you do, though. So I just before you get too far down that road.
I don't know, Steve. We might have to have a contest on who knows you better. But anyway, on if you have certain levels that you think are fair on the input side, right? So everyone is in, but what is fair is going to take a lot of conversations, right? So if you have ideas on what that fairness level is. So for example, Uber and Lyft are in, but they also, there's tensions with the taxis. So then the taxis have to be in, but the way we pay for those things is different. And then the kind of, when you Airbnb your car and loan it out, those people are in, but then they have tensions with the rental cars, right? So there's all these tensions between new technologies versus traditional technologies, and figuring out how those fees are fair is going to take some time. So if anyone on this call has ideas or expertise in that, that's going to be really important. And so we need to talk about that. On the output side, right, how much should be spent on multimodal, right? Our last transportation bill was 15%, and that's not going to be the amount we spend. We're going to be spending a lot more, right? And so what is that level that we should be spending on? What is the level we should be spending on climate and infrastructure? And then, you know, there are some jurisdictions, some who are probably part of NATA, and I'll just put it out there, that do want to change the funding formula for the local share. And there is going to be tension between urban, suburban, and rural areas. And I really want that input from NATA on what that means. And should the share just be the same, and then we're asking that you spend a certain amount on multimodal and a certain amount on climate? I don't know. I think this, you know, I worked with a lot of you on Senate Bill 1 during special session, which was for business relief, but figuring out that allocation through the counties and what was fair, and how we made sure we were taking care of rural counties, took all of Thanksgiving weekend. And that was, you know, one small pot of one-time money. So figuring this out for the long term is going to take time and effort. And I need the thought leadership of everyone on this call to figure out what that should look like.
Thank you.
Good morning, Noah.
All right. Thank you, Faith. So any other, okay, Karen, go ahead and jump in.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to say to Representative Gray and Senator Hunter that we really appreciate the work you're doing on this. And I know you've been working very closely with Shoshana Liu, the Executive Director of CDOT, and with Kay Kelly, who's our new Chief of Innovative Mobility. We're looking at the greenhouse gas mobility blueprint as well. And so we're excited about that. But what I wanted to say was we have a 10-year list of projects that we have identified through a 4-year effort that we do once every 4 years. And a number of those projects are on NATA's list as well. And so we will be looking at putting together a letter with some recommendations from us as well as to what our needs are up here that coincide, I think, with what we have done at CDOT in order to get these projects on the list. So appreciate the offer that you've given us to give you some input, and we'll be doing that. And as chair of the Transportation Commission, I really want to thank you for the collaborative effort you've made with our senior leadership and with our Shoshana Liu and Kay Kelly on this. So thank you very much.
Thanks. And then that
Go ahead.
one quick thing, and then I'll have Matt jump in. When we've also been working with CEDA on their Main Streets projects, which I know a lot of communities in NATA got some money through the Main Streets projects. So when we talk about multimodal, we're also talking about projects like those that really start tying how we're using transportation to land use as well. And so the first round of funding for the Main Streets project just went out a couple weeks ago. And so also doing more things like that is going to be part of this. Matt?
Yeah, and the other thing I'd say is just there were a couple of people who've kind of mentioned this as a fear, and what we're not talking about is changing how projects get prioritized through CDOT or through the commission, and like having legislators write their own projects in there. You know, like Faith and I are not being like, and also, hey, we've got all this funding, and also all of it goes to Westminster and Broomfield. You know, like we're not, you know, and putting that in the hands of the legislature more than before. Like, you know, we're having a conversation about priorities and about percentages and about how money gets spent, but there's not a legislative, like, we're usurping people and starting to earmark projects. We're not going to do that. I mean, if anybody's going to succeed at it, it'd be the two of us, but we also think that the system as it exists right now is working. So don't worry about that. Like we're trying to get more money and then broader priorities, but not to change the fundamental way that the system works, that the legislature decides which project gets funded and which doesn't, because we're not going to do that.
Great, thank you so much, guys. So I agree with Karen. I think that there is a really good summary that we could put together from at least a NATA perspective. We do have a list of projects of our priorities, so I think that could be great feedback for you, and then we could summarize that for you and get that back to you. I see that Jessica Sangren did have a quick question in the chat of when do you think the white page will be ready for initial review. I think if anything, definitely keep us in the loop for that if you don't have a specific date already, because I know that we do have a lot of thought leaders, and we would like to continue to be a voice in this process. And then Ari, do you want to jump in with your comment? It's a long one in the chat. I figured I'd just give you the floor.
I apologize. First off, like I said in the chat, I really do support all the work that you're doing from a transportation perspective. I think that one of the things that we have to look at are the lessons learned from the pandemic and what are the trends that we see and how technology is having an impact on transportation. And so to my point, it really comes down to, what is that strategy for how we're going to deal with that fundamental shift? And everybody who currently today uses Zoom or other things for their work, therefore doesn't go into the office. And as here in Erie, obviously our per capita rate of people who work remotely has always been the highest in the state for the last number of years, and is only going to continue after this pandemic ends. And I think that trend may continue metro-wide. So from a usage perspective on those roads, there may be less cars on the road during those most impactful times. So from a fee perspective, have we thought about how, whether or not studied those fees may be less than what you expected from that perspective? And so that's something I think that is key to that.
And sure, I can address that because I both am a Tabor nerd and represent the good people very well, some of them. One side of the county line. The answer is yes, and people have asked us that question. My answer back though is that we need your help, because if we're going to do fees, the way fees work under Colorado law is that the person you're charging the fee upon there needs to be a demonstrable benefit to that person from the fee. And so what we would need to do is have enough background to connect the fact, if we're going to, because we hear a lot about this in more rural areas about like building up broadband access, for example, or expanding broadband access, or doing, putting in charging fees to people who are using the roads to then provide benefits to people who are not using the roads. And that can get problematic. Like that's not how fees normally work, but it doesn't have to be a 1-to-1 ratio. So if we can show, and I think it's true, I think you think it's true, I think it's the nature of your question, is by keeping more people off the roads, we're benefiting the people who are on the roads because of congestion and other things, then we could be able to have some other sort of infrastructure build out, support programs for work from home, like that sort of thing, based on the fees that we're charging to people who are using the roads. But we need your help in building that case. Like we need to build a record that says by supporting folks who otherwise would be on the road and they're not, that we are going to benefit people who are on the roads or are on a train or are on a bus or are on anything else. But we need your help in building that record if we're going to do it, because you're not the first person who asked. Like several people have asked us that, and the answer is yes, but it's limited. It's not that if we do the fee package that we're talking about, there has to be a connection between the benefit to the people who pay the fee and the people who get the benefit of the fee. Like they have to be the same people. But there's also a way, I think there's an argument to be made to say exactly what you're saying, which is it is a benefit
to commuters to have people not commuting and to free up space. And that's also like very helpful to our climate goals and everything else we want to do. But I ask you for your help, which is helping us build that record.
And I'll add to that, CDOT modeling does have modeling as related to COVID, knowing that this is culturally going to be permanent less people on the road. So when you see all the charts from CDOT, they have their pre-COVID road use and then post-COVID, and not just temporarily, but ongoing in a post-COVID world, what that looks like. So that's been taken into the modeling. And then additionally, one of the things that we're looking at and talking about is on large companies, do we have a certain percentage of remote work requirement? And that if your company doesn't want to meet that requirement, you then pay a fee, right? So we are tying that in. That's one of the things we're looking at in the bill. And then additionally, we do have a lot of people, and this is why we talk about road usage versus vehicle miles traveled. So we've seen that when you're at home all day, before I drive to work and just stop at the store on the way home for my groceries. Now, because I'm already home, I'm much more likely to get it delivered. So I personally, Faith Winter, I'm not on the road, but that service is still using that road for me, and that fee will be on that service. And so I think a lot of the folks working from home might be using roads differently, getting their Amazon packages delivered, their Uber Eats, their King Supers delivery. And that's going to be incorporated into this, which part of our goal in this conversation is to start shifting to a road usage fee, because we know that's ultimately where we have to go and not rely on a gas tax or a gas fee. But road usage fees for the average public right now, we're not culturally there or politically there. That seems like big government in your car. But on all these apps, you know exactly where your package is. Amazon tells you it's 6 stops away and you can watch it come to you. Right, your Uber Eats is showing your little driver on the map. So you've already kind of given up that piece of privacy in order for that convenience. So can we build the technology and the structure to start culturally and politically moving us towards more road usage type things?
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here and giving us that legislative update. I think if you were monitoring the chat, a lot of people are really supportive of this. I know that Bo mentioned earlier that, you know, transportation mobility was the #1 issue that for our business community prior to COVID, pre-COVID. And so, you know, this has such a huge impact on, you know, not only all of our constituents' lives, but our business community. So thank you so much for tackling this and really trying to make a positive change in the direction that we need. It's long overdue. So we appreciate that. So, and thank you for the first week of January is when we might anticipate a white paper. The only thing I will ask is if other folks have feedback for Matt or Faith, we'll send out their email addresses if you don't already have them. And then that way you guys could continue to ask questions and provide your feedback to them at that point. And NATA will come up with a formal recommendation letter as well, per Karen's recommendation. So other than that, I want to thank you guys for being here. I am going to move us on in our meeting, but thank you so much. And it was a great conversation. So have a good rest of your morning. Thanks, guys, for jumping on so early for us. All right. So thanks. All right, so we are going to take a quick step back. We do need to do approval of the October 22nd NATA meeting minutes. I hope everybody was able to review them. Carson sent them out, or Karen sent them out with the agenda. Are there any changes that this group had for those minutes? Okay, not seeing any. Can I get approval of the minutes? Everyone in support, please say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone against? All right, great. So then we'll approve those minutes as written.
We probably ought to have a motion and a second for approval of minutes.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Can I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved, Malcolm Fleming.
Second, Jessica.
Great, thanks, Jessica and Malcolm. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to rush too quickly. That was my bad. All right, so we're going to move on to the election of the 2021 board officers. So I do at this time want to open up nominations from the floor. These are the folks that have put their name in, if you will, already, and volunteered to serve as the NATA leadership. For chair, we have Mayor Pro Tem Jessica Sanger from Thornton. For vice chair, we have Councilmember Joan Peck from Longmont. And then for treasurer, we have Mayor Pro Tem Anita Seitz from Westminster. I do want everyone to just understand that this isn't a guaranteed slate. There are nominations accepted from the floor. So at this time, if you would like to submit your name or somebody else's name for either of these three positions, please speak out. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands or anything in the chat. All right, so I'm going to close floor nominations at this point. And so these are the three names that are going to be presented for leadership. Karen, do we need to do a formal vote if there are no contested elections?
I think we should, just in case somebody down the road feels like they didn't get the opportunity to oppose the vote. So, Carson set up to put that out there right now. Is that right, Carson?
That's right. I'm going to launch a poll via Zoom. It should pop up on your screen. It's just going to have the first choice, and then NA, I had to put a second choice in there.
Okay.
So just reminding everyone that it's the 13 jurisdictions, Smart Commute, and ACE Rep, and one representative from each. So we should have only one from Erie, one from Broomfield, one from Westminster, etc. So if you wouldn't mind voting on this, and then Carson will give you the results. And Joyce Downing, Smart Commute.
Yeah. Did anyone have issues with that pop-up that needed to vote? Just want to make sure we're all good on the tech side.
It worked fine. I hope for the Erie representatives, they don't mind me voting for Erie.
Okay, so Malcolm's voting for the Erie representative.
10.
That's
okay.
Probably right, Carson, because I don't think there's anyone here for Frederick, Firestone, or Dacono.
Okay.
So I think everybody who's here is probably represented in that.
All right, there's the results.
Okay.
Correct.
Great. Well, it looks like we have approved our new leadership for 2021. So congratulations, ladies. You know, I think it's really important that we continue to have strong leadership for this group. And I'm really excited about where you take us in 2021. Hopefully it's a lot better than 2020 because COVID wrecked a lot of our plans. So we'll continue that great leadership. All right, well, thank you and congratulations. So next up, we have a Smart Commute report.
And this will be very quick, but we do an annual report with employers, and Catherine Sanders is in charge of that. She's done a fabulous job collating all that information from the survey, and we want to give you a thumbnail of that. And Catherine, are you still with us? I'll turn that over to you.
Yep, I'm here. I'm going to keep this very brief. I'm going to copy the link to our actual report into the chat so you can download it. We had 1,200 responses to our survey this year, which was less than last year, but still quite good considering we're in a time of COVID. We really thank Longmont, Northglenn, and Thornton for their participation with their employees. We had 11 employers participate at a high enough level that they're able to receive a customized report comparing their own results in their organization to the regional averages. You can see here that, as would be expected, teleworking is a substantial part of the pie this year. Last year it was 2.5% of all of the representative commutes, and now it's nearly 33% of all commutes, so a significant jump. All other modes decreased, with the exception of walking was a negligible change. We did collect information about commute corridor as well. You can see that I-25 is of course the most prevalent commute corridor. You can go to the next slide. All right, we did ask about COVID, recognizing that it likely had a substantial impact on people's commutes. It was actually less than I would have thought. It's about 55% of people felt like their commute was changed due to COVID. And we asked how people's commutes changed. Most people are teleworking more as a result, but we also had some increase in working staggered shifts and compressed work week schedules as a result. As part of the report, or sorry, as part of the survey, we also ask about workplace policies people are interested in. Flexible work schedule policies were the #1 workplace program of interest, which is a change from previous years. So people are looking for flexibility right now. And people are also looking with interest at biking and transit as the highest modes that they're interested in learning more about. We can go to the next slide. So we do ask people about what would encourage them to walk, bike, ride transit, and carpool more often. This is a little hard to read. I just wanted to point it out that this is in our report, and the city staff that's on the call might be interested in looking at the report in more detail. We can go to the next slide. And this is also small as far as reading here. This is to point to the fact that we look through over 1,600 write-in comments as part of this survey. We get very good information from people, and I do a lot of work trying to consolidate and then pull out comments that are very interesting for either employers or for agencies like RTD. Shared some of the comments that we received with RTD. So please download the report if you're interested in seeing some of these comments. And then thank you again to Longmont, North Glen, and Thornton for your participation. I have those customized reports coming your way for a couple of you that haven't received them yet. So thank you, that's all.
Wow, this is a fantastic report. So I do encourage everyone to click on that link, because as I'm going through and looking at all of the information in this report, it's absolutely fantastic. So make sure to click on the link that Catherine put in the chat. It's great. Thank you so much for all your hard work on this. It's amazing. Great. All right. Any questions for Catherine regarding the survey, or any thoughts that anyone from the group wants to share? All right. Great. Well, if you do have any great feedback or questions, please make sure to reach out to the Smart Commute team. I'm sure they could help you out. All right, so we're going to move on. Another very exciting person we have with us is December, just a great meeting. So we do get to have Deborah Johnson with us. I know that everyone has been very excited, frankly, since we heard that she was going to accept this position and come work with us at RTD. And so I do want to turn the floor over to Deborah for an introduction and just to hear your thoughts around your new position here in RTD. Of course, you know, it impacts our area a lot, and so we're excited to have you on board, and we're excited to start working with you. Thank you so much for being here. Are you with us, Deborah?
Yes, I am. Can you not hear me?
Oh, now we can. There you go.
Thank you very kindly. I was just saying thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning to you, members of the board, and to all that are virtually assembled this morning. As introduced, I am Deborah Johnson, the General Manager and CEO of the Regional Transportation District. And I want to thank you for the opportunity. I have to tell you, this meeting was very enlightening. as I reflect back over my past 30 days, having a briefing such as this that oriented me to all the various projects and initiatives and the alliance that's taking place in the North area, it's very exciting. I come into this space looking at us as being a collaborative partner in all of this, recognizing the steadfast work that Senator Winter and Matt Gray are doing. I am enthusiastically motivated to be more entrenched into what's happening from the vantage point when we look at transportation and what we need to do collectively to ensure that we have viable mobility options. I look at RTD as being an integral player in that, not just to advocate transit, but to ensure that we are working in tandem to create a comprehensive transportation network. Hearing about Front Range Rail, I think that's very exciting. One would think, oh my gosh, that's competing with RTD. It's not. It's actually complementary, because when we can expand our networks throughout the vast region, that makes us more of a competitor when we look to bring business to this area, when we look at tourism, which we could very much use as we look for a resurgence in our economy. So all of these different aspects that we have, before us in the tomorrows to come, I want you to know that I stand in sync with all of you guys, looking to move our agency in a place where we can collaborate and be, partners in all of this. Just really quickly, because I know there's other things on the agenda, and I want to ensure that I yield the floor to Director Lubau, who has been, such an advocate for transportation, not only for the region, but more specifically for, the North area. I want to ensure that she has ample time. But what I will say in reference to my experience in transportation, I come here very enthusiastically to listen, recognizing that I don't know what I don't know. And I do recognize as well that you all in the North area have been vying for, vital transportation linkages, and recognizing while we may be cash strapped in some areas, I want you to know that I am open. My team is, as I have spoken with them. Let's not look through the rearview mirror. Let's look through the, windshield and drive forward, and recognizing that opportunities are abundant, and collectively we can seize those opportunities to make the best of what transportation should be in this dynamic region. So with that, I will yield the floor and say thank you. I don't know if I have time for questions, but recognizing that I have had the opportunity to be in a lot of different places, in a lot of different forums. I want everybody to know that I welcome the opportunity to be engaged, to hear concerns, to hear issues that may be prevalent to your respective areas, and recognizing while I am just one person and don't have the panacea to cure all ailments, I am willing to listen, and collectively and collaboratively, I think we can come up with that cure. So with that, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and look forward to participating in the future and whatever else lies ahead for all of us in this transportation space. Thank you.
Great. I do want to open this up for questions. If folks do have, a question or a comment for Deborah, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Again, it's just a fantastic opportunity to finally get to meet you and to continue to work with you moving forward. And so I do want to give folks the opportunity to speak up if they'd like to. So it looks like we got a comment from Jessica Sangren. Go ahead.
Thanks, Julie. Deborah, thank you so much for your comments. I actually heard you speak last night at the DRCOG meeting as well, and I think it's just really refreshing to hear your thoughts about moving forward. I think that this NATA committee has been very engaged for quite some time, and so I'm really looking forward to hopefully in-person meetings and meeting you in person and standing next to you as we have these conversations. I think we're all looking forward to that, but I really appreciate your comments and look forward to your leadership on RTD.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Appreciate that. And I too look forward to standing next to you sometime soon and having a conversation in person.
Yes, I agree. I think everyone is kind of looking forward to that again. Steve, do you have a question or a comment? You're on mute, Steve.
Not usually what people want. They
want me on mute.
It's all right. I'm just joking. Welcome to the team, Ms. Johnson, and we're excited to be working with you. One of the things that I bring up just about almost every meeting, maybe twice at NATA meetings, is making sure that as as the North Metro area has finally get to the front of the line to get some of our investments capacity built out and some of the improvements in it, you know, truly to help us, you know, plug into this network, we don't want to see the game change. Meaning sometimes what happens is where there's this big line and everyone says, you guys will be next, you guys will be next. And then by the time we get to the front of the line, they say, okay, now we're going to change how the line is configured, the rules of the game. And we just want to make sure that RTD is supported and the wonderful leaders that we have representing us in North Metro RTD are able to help RTD fulfill the commitments RTD has made into the North Metro area in the past. And so that's the only comment I give. I'm looking forward to working with you. You're walking into the best RTD board that I've seen in decades. So I think you're going to do really well. But just remember, please don't change the game on us. Now that we're at the front of the line to finally get some of these projects and capacity built out, we really want to be able to have transit for our folks. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for those comments and recognizing the sentiments that you express. I know there's been some angst and some frustration in reference to that area. And so in an effort to manage expectations, recognizing that, you know, oftentimes the rules of engagement can change. I want you to know that I'm willing to listen and have a better understanding. I don't want to make promises I can't keep, but I do stand here, or sit here, I should say, this morning and let you know that I'm willing to work with you, willing to listen. But I'm a person that puts forward my word, and I'll manage expectations, recognizing that I am learning about what's happening here and also in relationship to the promise that's been made, you know, as it relates to funding and things of the like. We have to ensure that we have our ducks all in a row. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say that publicly, because I am a firm believer in saying what I mean and mean what I say. And when I say I want to work with you, I will do that to the best of my ability, not recognizing what other unknown variables may come into play. So thank you very much for your comments.
All right, it looks like we have, oh, Malcolm, you want to jump in?
I did. Welcome, Ms. Johnson. Thank you so much for coming to Colorado. I think you got a great vision for RTD, and we're all really looking forward to a great visionary leadership from you. I think, as Commissioner O'Dorizio said, we don't want to be, we're at the front of the line. We need to make sure that we stay there because there's some promises made in the past that haven't been kept. And I think part of the reason they haven't been kept is the lack of leadership at the top to be able to figure out ways to achieve those promises that have been made in the past, particularly with the fast tracks. But another area is in Erie, and especially fast-growing suburban community. We've got 30,000 people now. We're rapidly growing faster, and yet there are places in the RTD system with only 1,500 people that have better service. So we need to figure out how to more equitably provide that service within the constraints that RTD has and really expand the financial capability of RTD to serve the region. I'll be the first to say you don't have enough money to satisfy the dreams that people have and the promises that were made a long time ago. So we need your leadership to help figure out a better way to fund what RTD has promised to deliver. So thank you. I'm sure you're up to it and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you very much for those comments. I greatly appreciate them, recognizing the fact that, yes, the foundation of our house right now isn't as solid as we like to be. We have to get that into place, you know, fix the dilapidated roof and the plumbing, and then we look forward to adding on additional rooms. But recognizing all of that, I want you to know as well that I appreciate what you've said. I pride myself on being a transformational leader as opposed to transactional. So considering that as the backdrop, I applaud you for bringing this out in this forum. And I look forward, as I said, with the previous speakers, to work collaboratively and figure out what we can do in the future. So thank you very kindly.
Great, thank you. Sam Taylor, I saw that you put a comment in the chat. Would you like to elaborate or speak to that?
Sure, thank you. Ms. Johnson, congratulations on the job. You come at a very interesting time. I'm not sure why anybody would want to run a public entity such as this, any type of mass transportation in COVID. Just the revenues have collapsed pretty much in the ridership. But thank you for joining. As has been alluded to already, there's a lack of trust in RTD, especially up in the north area, because most of the funds for the last 20, 30 years have all gone to the southern area and promises have been made. And the north area has pretty much gotten a short shift, and it is finally shifting. I am glad to see that you have a really strong board that's very knowledgeable, something that has not always been there in the past. So I look forward to see how you're going to overcome that that public lack of trust RTD has at the moment.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your comments, and I do recognize that there has been a lack of trust. I think first and foremost is getting out and listening, being in forums such as this. As I said before, you know, it's ensuring that I learn what it is that I don't know. I also think it's very important to be highly communicative, but also when you communicate, you have to listen more than you speak. So basically orienting myself, especially since I'm outside of the region, and basically coming in and looking through a different lens, I think can be helpful, because I think it's all about collaboration and partnerships and recognizing who the viable stakeholders are. And it gets back to the simple fact, if you know a tree falls in the forest and you don't hear it, did it really fall? So with that as a backdrop, if we're not communicating out and there's not information, in the absence of information, people often invent their own, and then it's that vicious game of telephone. So I think it's incumbent upon me, as well as my team and in collaboration with members of the board, that we do make ourselves visible, that we do have an understanding. And as I said before in my previous response, I am all about managing expectations. All I have control over is my word. So what comes out of my mouth is very important to me. So I think that is the basic premise behind any aspect of building trust, especially with a community that may not have a willingness in reference to embracing and believing that. But recognizing that I am here, I represent something different. And what I mean by that, I don't mean that to be construed in a negative way, but basically it is that, you know, as I come in, it's managing all expectations. And if I can't do something, I'll be the first to let you know. But when I say I can't do something, that does not mean that we can't cooperatively do something together. So thank you very much for that. And I look forward to engaging and learning more.
All right, thank you for those comments. So I agree with, you know, my fellow colleagues who've spoken before me, and I really think that, you know, Malcolm hit the nail on the head. And you know, our major concerns are always equity, and we understand that, you know, 2020 is a lot different world than it was last year, and especially with the COVID crisis, the pandemic. You know, the impacts have been real for RTD. And so I think moving forward, you know, working collaboratively with you, I think is always important. And then just making sure that communication is open, because as you continue to navigate and learn the system and guide it, we definitely want to be at the table and have those conversations with you. And our biggest concerns are always, you know, how are we making sure that our constituents are, you know, are having their needs met? How are our businesses getting the support that they need during this time? And, you know, transportation and mobility is top of mind. So it's so important that you're here, that we get to work with you moving forward. I think a lot of people are excited to see what you have in store for us. And we're really looking at moving forward with that relationship, building on it, and making sure we have open lines of communication and expectation moving forward. Do I have any other questions or comments from this group before we let Deborah leave us?
Charlotte? Friday. Oh,
Judy, are you trying to speak?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought I saw you trying to reach out. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and welcome, Deborah. We are so excited to have you and so excited to work with you. So it was great to finally meet you. I know it's been tough to get you. Everyone wants to meet you. And so good luck moving forward, and let's continue to work together.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I agree as well.
Awesome. Great. All right. And next up on our agenda, all right, Director Judy Lubau. So I think we wanted to give you just a thank you so much for all of your hard work and everything that you've done for District I over, I don't know, how long have you been serving, Judy, in this chair?
8
in this
years.
director seat?
Sounds like
8 years?
Sometimes, yes. Long time.
That's amazing.
I know.
Great. I'm sure you've seen far too much than you ever expected.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So do you have any reflections or interesting stories you'd like to share with this group of your wonderful experience of serving as RTD director?
Well, what I would like to share is that certainly for this area and for this district, which is District I'm the only RTD district that has 2 unfunded corridors, 2. So it's you need patience and you need determination and you need humility. All of those things will help. Let me see. I just wanted to say that it's been a privilege working with you folks, and I will miss not only doing the work, but I will miss this particular time because I think it's a time of transformation for RTD. I have no doubt it's a time of transformation, but that's going to mean that not only does RTD itself need to change, but our stakeholders need to work with us in making that change. And I really urge you, as the folks who know most about transportation in this area, to think through what you would like to see from RTD in terms of its changes. If we are going to be more of a partner, what will that look like? You know what you're missing. What haven't you gotten in the past? Tell us. Now is the time for transformation, and it's a rare time, and please use it well. So I urge you to think about what are the different areas where we can be partners in a better way. Where are the areas where there could be better communication? And mold this thing to your own needs, because now is the time. Carpe diem. I will miss working with you guys, but I'm sure I will continue seeing you as we work together for the benefit of the people of our area. Something I wanted to stress, and I know that Deborah Johnson has talked about this, that I think there's a concept that we have about geographic equity. And she had said she hadn't heard that idea before, or that's a new idea for her. And I think it relates to the size of this huge RTD. And it is very large. And we have people in urban areas and people in suburban areas and people in the boony areas. So we have a lot of boony and suburban. And what that means is that we don't have the density of the people in the core urban areas, but we're still putting in the money. And we need geographic equity in making sure that our constituents also get served. And so that issue needs to be worked out. And it's a continual working out, a tension between serving the core economic area and serving everybody else who's also putting in the money. Please, if you've got ideas about how to do that better, again, suggest that to RTD, because I think it's going to be wide open, and that's very exciting. So That's it for me. It won't be goodbye. I'm sure I'll see you as we continue working for the good of the people of our area. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Judy. And again, you can see from the chat, so many people are thanking you for your service. You've been a force to reckon with down there, and you've been a strong advocate for your region, which, you know, as you said, is probably takes a lot of patience and determination. So thank you so much for persevering and continuing to fight for the North area. It's just been fantastic to have you on board. I think everyone's learned so much from you. And so, yeah, you're right. It's not goodbye. Please come back and visit us. Please come back and continue to grace us with your expertise, if you will, that you've achieved over this past 8 years. But thank you so much for your service. I think it's very important that we just show our appreciation to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, great. And again, please let the praise of Judy continue in the chat. Make sure to read that, Judy. It's great. And then, so finally, we wanted to do a quick presentation. I'm sorry I didn't give you more time, Tammy. Presentation by Dr. Cog, the Data Subcommittee update. So this is very important work. I'm very excited to hear this update. Take it away.
Julie, I'm actually going to turn this over to Brad and Andy with Dr. Cog. They are the gurus on this data. Right. So take it away,
Great.
Brad.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tammy and Julie. So Brad Calvert, I'm with the Denver Regional Council of Governments, Dr. Cog. I oversee the regional planning development shop there, so kind of the planners, economists, GIS folks. I know my colleague Andy Taylor is also on this morning, much like Representative Gray. He deals with child care issues first thing in the morning, so he may pop in if there are questions. I will go through this pretty quick given the time, and I appreciate Carson running the slides for us. I will just mention that I'm sharing some sort of basically the delivery of a final product. We work on the growth and development land use assumption side of the conversation, and really what I'm sharing with you is a final product, or sort of an overview of a final product that really this data subcommittee that Tammy and Julie were alluding to really got involved in, like the 2018, 2019 timeframe, so that when we deliver a product in 2020, it is as good as it can possibly can be. So I just appreciate the forethought and the contributions from the NATA folks that got involved with me and my team early, again, to make sure we deliver a high quality product. So next slide, Carson. I'm giving you some excerpts. We've delivered 3 presentations to the Dr. Cog board on this topic over the last couple of quarters this year. So if this is of interest to you, go look. You can find these on the Dr. Cog calendar, and you can find even more information. So I am just sort of, again, hitting kind of some highlights. The first one being kind of sharing the actual small area forecast, and then some other additional work that we've been doing internally at Dr. Cog to sort of talk about what does that forecast tell us about the future. I'm going to share mostly kind of air quotes here land use types of things. We at Dr. Cog are sort of putting the final touches on a public review draft of the regional transportation plan. That's sort of our long range vision for transportation. So this is a little light on the transportation side of this, but please be on the lookout. We'll be sharing a lot of analysis related to the RTP over the coming months. Next slide, please. I'm glad someone else used the terms inputs and outputs earlier so that I didn't have to do it, because that's basically what I'm talking about here. Lots of inputs to the left, working to the right, becoming outputs. So just our work, which is kind of in that middle side, which is really understanding the sort of spatial allocation of growth in the region, is really set by the demographer's office at the state level, right? So they establish county level forecast for population, households, and jobs. We basically take the baton for them and understand within a county, based on local plans, policies, and aspirations, what would that distribution look like in the future? And then ultimately that becomes an input to the work we do on the travel modeling side to understand where people live and work and how that influences how they travel and what that means for the overall system. Next slide, please. This is a lot of process stuff. I'll just hit the sort of highlights. we really use sort of the input of the NATA data subcommittee to really just inform our thought process going into our work. And I won't sort of, I'll skip some of the sort of technical details on this, but like a couple of key ones here are I bolded for the slide. Previously in our work, we really want to understand sort of local planning priorities through both planning and zoning. We previously were using kind of a regional zoning categorization, trying to assemble zoning as sort of a crosswalk across the region. We changed our approach and now do our best to actually reflect individual zoning categories across the region, resulting in like 1,500 or 1,400 categories that we use in our assumptions to understand what we sort of think of as capacity. What is the capacity of an area to grow based on existing zoning? And the other thing that the data subcommittee really confirmed for us and kind of gave us a tailwind to continue to pursue this is incorporating what we know to be the development pipeline in the region, right? What has been approved locally that we can assume or assert as population, household, and employment growth going forward. So that was a really big lift for Andy and his team to get that data set sort of built and ultimately integrated into our modeling work. Next slide. And then so really, we do a lot of data work. We obviously work with models. That's only part of the equation. We really need local feedback to review sort of what the model puts out. And so really in kind of the May, June, July timeframe is when we were working on that. So as you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, when we put out an initial set of population or household and employment forecast, we got about 600 individual comments to say up, down, move this over here type of things. And that's really important for our work. I looked quickly based on the slides that Karen showed earlier, it looked like about 70% of the NATA jurisdiction representatives submitted comments during this time. And again, that's a really important part of our process. And so we kind of wrapped up the work in terms of producing the small area forecast in July. And posted it to our regional data catalog. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides here in a second that are kind of maps of what the forecast looks like. You can go find this data at data.drcog.org because trust me, when you see these slides here in a second, there's only so much you can interpret on the fly. And then we've been spending a fair amount of time with our board sort of talking about what we've been calling a gap analysis related to the forecast. Next slide, please. I think an important piece here is, like I mentioned, the work of the demographer's office is really a key sort of input into our process. And I think the thing that folks need to recognize most importantly over the next 30 years is that our growth is actually slowing as a region. That does not mean that we're not performing at a high sort of standard in terms of sort of the economic fundamentals of the region. It's just the reality of the nation's growth is slowing, therefore our growth is slowing. To give you an example as to why, birth rates in our region have been declining since 2007. That means less people having kids, those kids growing up, and those folks having kids. That just ultimately sort of pumps the brakes on growth overall. Next slide. And here's sort of what that looks like. So again, household growth and job growth, looking at a couple of decades here, really kind of the last 40 years. Just take a look at even just that household growth at the top. You see in the decade that we're in right now, expecting about 225,000 additional households in the region over the next decade. Now go out to 2040 to 2050. That number gets cut in half. And you can see a pretty similar downward trajectory on the job side with really that 2010 to 2020 number you see is almost an anomaly. That is really, there's a big piece of that is that it's adding jobs back that were lost in 2008 and 2009 during the Great Recession. So a lot of that is just simply digging out of the hole from a jobs perspective that was dug during the recession. Next slide, please. I will just sort of hit these quickly because again, I know on screen there's only so much you can interpret. And again, these are the things that you can see and find on the data catalog, both the raw data as well as these maps. And really the main thing that I want to sort of point out is, so on the left-hand side, this is households in 2020, right-hand side, households in 2050. And I'll just sort of echo something that Karen mentioned when I saw sort of some of her slides. People are already here. And sometimes when we talk about our forecast, that gets lost in the conversation. When you talk about 30 years of growth, that alone is an important conversation, but we shouldn't forget that there is a lot of growth or a lot of households and jobs in the region now. So I'll just ask Carson to maybe flip through, go to the next one. So that's households. Here's sort of the jobs picture. And this, just because it's not showing as sort of a green, this is a sort of concentration map. So if you're not seeing some areas, that just means maybe it's not the highest concentrations of growth, but that doesn't mean that there isn't growth occurring. So next slide. And this is sort of the change. So kind of give you a sense again, left-hand side, household, right-hand side, jobs. Darker means sort of a higher level of sort of growth concentrations over this 30-year period. Again, hard to pick up on screen, so I'd encourage you to take a look and dig a little deeper if this is of interest. Next slide, please. So I'll walk through these really quickly. One of the things that we've been working with our board on is not just to sort of complete this small area forecast and put it down and let it feed into the transportation network. Let's have a conversation about what this means for the region. We produce performance measures for our board of directors every year that are about observed data. We're using this as an opportunity to look forward and ask ourselves, what does the forecast suggest in terms of how and in what way we are achieving the goals set forth in the regionally adopted Metro Vision Plan. Next slide. So again, these are just a few examples. This is really sort of talking about sort of that split between multifamily and single family. Prior to 2010, very dominant sort of single family in terms of our housing portfolio. A huge shift in the last decade where almost a 50-50 split between multifamily units and single family units. But that didn't really move the needle overall in the region. We're still predominantly single family in terms of our housing stock. Next slide. Also just sort of thinking about the affordability of housing. Just a quick statistics refresh. A median means that you're in the middle of a series of numbers. So what you're seeing in that blue dotted line means the median related to household income. So in terms of the stuff you're seeing on the left-hand side means that you are a household that is earning less than the area median income. If you fall into that category, there's 6 out of 10 are ultimately housing cost burdened, meaning they are paying more than 30% of their income for housing. So that's just sort of a reality check. When we talk about adding households to the region, there's a fair expectation that many of them are ultimately going to be housing cost burdened. They're going to have housing, but they're going to be paying more each month for that housing in such a way that allows them to not necessarily pay for other expenses. Next slide. And we aren't really keeping up as a region in terms of the deed-restricted affordable housing production either. This is using that scheduled development pipeline data set that I mentioned. Short version here, if you look at all of the units that we can actually understand as to whether they're going to be deed-restricted in the region, only 5,000 is the number that we're expecting to be produced over the next sort of 10 or 15 years. Clearly not meeting the needs of those cost-burdened households that I talked about previously. Next slide. And this is part of a series, so you're only going to get sort of one of these maps. We looked at sort of areas of household growth, and are those areas that have existing residential development, or are they adding residential development where there maybe is not a lot of residential development now? So looking at areas that currently, well, as of 2010, had less than 1 household per acre. Those areas are a key driver in our growth going forward. About 50% of the household growth in the region over the next 30 years are in places that as of 2010 really didn't have a lot of residential development, and they're transitioning to medium and high density residential areas. Next slide. And a big driver of that are what we are sort of referring to as master plan communities. I certainly don't mean that in the real sort of real estate sense. They're just sort of those larger, long run development projects that are on the books that have been approved locally. Just looking at these large master plan communities, that accounts for 215,000 housing units over the next 25 or 30 years. Many of them with build out that extends well beyond 2050, which is our horizon year. And so that's one of the things that from a data perspective is particularly tricky for us, is how to continue to assume and assert that these developments will continue to be built out as approved. Next slide. And then another sort of key thing in our sort of long range thinking about how the region sort of grows and develops over time is this idea of urban centers, places that can and are well positioned to be served by high frequency and high capacity transit. What you're seeing on the left-hand side are targets for the future set by the DRCOG Board of Directors, expecting or hoping for 25% of the region's housing and 50% of jobs to be located in urban centers in the future. And according to this forecast, we're falling well short of that, which is really kind of one of the key conversations we want to have with our board is how we can improve performance and make sure that we are actually growing in a way that the Metro Vision Plan is aspiring for us to grow. Next slide. So I know I just went real fast. My apologies, but a few just sort of next steps. As I mentioned, sort of gearing up for a public review draft for the Regional Transportation Plan, which I know obviously is an important thing for this group to provide feedback on. Doing a fair number of sort of deeper dives with our board on some of these gap analysis results, including affordable housing, the urban centers piece that I mentioned. One thing that I thought in particular this group would be interested in is in 2021, we're sort of piloting a more formal feedback loop with the State Demography Office, so that one of the constraints that we have when we have conversations with our local partners about the work that we do is maybe some feelings that the county control totals aren't actually representing local growth aspirations. So we're trying to figure out a way to work with the Demography Office to make sure that we've created a real feedback loop where we can bring local government perspective to all elements of the conversations about growth in the region. And then we are, as always, sort of thinking about sort of technical improvements that we can make to our tools as well, including the sort of the choice models that we use to help us understand where people are going to live in the future, and also working on a series of improvements that help us use both county controls as well as regional controls, which I won't get into the details of that, but just a note that we are constantly looking for process and technical improvements as well. So I'm sure I'm over, but I appreciate the time. Happy to chat or whatever's most helpful for the group.
All right. Thank you so much, Brett, for that presentation. It's such important work that you have been able to accomplish. And so I think everyone is excited about some of these new modeling numbers. So Tammy did put in the link in the chat, the data drcog.org website. So feel free to go there and check that out. I know there's a lot of data nerds on here who want to look at that a little closer. So please feel free. I'm not going to take any questions at this point because we are over. I'm sorry, Brett, I didn't give you enough time for a Q&A session, but we do appreciate your work and your presentation. If you do have questions for Brad, his email is obviously on the slide. And of course, you could always reach out to Smart Commute staff if you have any other questions or comments. So please do so. So I am going to wrap this up because we are 7 minutes over. Thank you so much for everybody who hung on to the very last minute. I do want to just say quickly, I know Eric already jumped off. Eric Davidson is the new District I RTD Director. I didn't recognize him earlier, and I am sorry for that. Thank you, Eric, and we look forward to working with you. As for me, I am completing my term as chair for NATA. 2020 has been a very interesting year, but I'm really excited to see what 2021 brings us. So I want everyone to have a safe, healthy, and happy holiday. I'm really excited about the leadership coming into NATA, and I hope that we will see you next year and get back to the hard work that we need to be doing. Karen, final comment?
Thank you, Julie. Yes, I want to thank you on behalf of all of us for your excellent leadership. And I think we accomplished a lot this year under very interesting circumstances. And who knew we could be so efficient while we're all in our homes, and appreciate the opportunity to work so closely with you, Julie, and your willingness to take on the leadership at the Accountability Committee as well. I wanted to let you know that Carson is going to snip out this portion of the NATA meeting of Brad's presentation, and we will send you that so you can see it on YouTube. And use it as a reference. Some very important information that has been really helpful with our input, I think, and I want to thank Tammy for working on that as well, and thank Dr. Cogstaff and specifically Brad and his team. I will be reaching out to you, Julie, and our new slate of officers to have a quick meeting, hopefully very soon, maybe next week or before the first of the year, to talk about how we want to give feedback to Faith and Matt on their proposal for transportation improvements and some ideas. So I'll send a invite out to all of you, and maybe we can do some brainstorming so we can get started on that. So want to thank everyone. Wow, what a year. And in January, we'll come back as we always do with an overview of what we accomplished in 2020 at NATA. So looking forward to that as well. And congratulations, Jessica. I think NATA is in great hands with you and your crew with Joan and with Anita, and thank you all for participating. We had 55 people on this call today. Most people stayed until the very end, and so I appreciate all of you. And thank you, Judy, for your leadership. Thank you, Eric, for coming on, and everybody else, and Deborah Johnson for taking the time out of her busy schedule to talk to us. So thank you all, and echo Julie's comments about have a safe and healthy and happy holiday season.
All right, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.